I can still clearly recall the searing, not only on, however, believe me when I say that the latte was searing, but it was scorching behind my eyes. The utter disgrace of standing there soaking wet as Jessica's. A smile curled into a flawless crimson lipstick, so arrogant that I wanted to yell, "Come get me!" another intern and try not to cause any trouble. This time, up the order. The whole. The meeting room burst out laughing. 8 individuals, the majority of whom I'd hardly talked to abruptly, became united in their coffee-running fun at my expense, moisture soaking into my bra from my cream blouse. The scent of hazelnuts and embarrassment I had worked at Blackage, and my nostrils. For precisely 3 weeks, partners, despite getting hired, being referred to as an intern 3 weeks of work, as a financial analyst. The way Jessica Gordon treats me personal assistant rather than her god comrade, I'm trembling even as I speak. Before I continue, this narrative, if you're please hit the subscribe button if you're watching this. Assure me that things will improve, and I genuinely want in the comments section if you've ever have a life with someone like Jessica, someone who simply made you feel insignificant since they might. In any case, I'm Renata. Though I was 31 at the time, I am now 34. Occurred, I'm not too impressive. I have dark hair and am of average height. Never know how to handle the type of people think that your face appears friendly when they are being kind. And I am the one who delivers baked pastries to work and the one who keeps in mind everyone's birthdays who occasionally laughs a bit, too loudly and says I'm sorry. I'd spent the most of my professional life with smaller companies, working eventually all the way up to my Uncle Leon died. He was by no means wealthy. However, he had made prudent investments throughout the years. In a few businesses, one of those did Blackage leave me his will. Total holdings, including a 17% interest established in Blackage Partners, which made me the 3rd largest person. Shareholder. But the truth is that no one Blackage was aware of this when I applied. I used my mother's maiden name for the job. Name. I wanted to learn more about the business. Internally, prior to making any, did they make decisions regarding my inheritance? Did they act morally and treat others with respect? I wanted my money here. Jessica Gordon made a long-term investment, giving me an embarrassing response. At one point, she was in charge of 38 blondes in perfect condition are acquired by clients. The type of lady who, for whatever reason, never has a hair out or a wrinkle in her clothing. She displayed her power like too much of the pricey perfume, and always ensuring that you took note of that. She had asked me to get coffee in the morning. I had even done it for the pre-meeting. However, it wasn't even close to my employment, because I was still the newbie and making an effort. To be useful, she had took a sip, twisted her face as if I had given her excrement before splattering directly into my Jessica, I said in front of everyone. Coffee spilling from my lips, I murmured gently. Chin onto the table at the conference. That was totally superfluous. Oh my gosh, she learnt by rolling her eyes dramatically. To take a joke and figure out I requested almond milk instead of regular coffee. This is obviously oat milk, but it wasn't. I knew it was precisely what she had requested, since I had double-checked her order. She had already corrected me twice, so I specifically requested that I begin. But she, "Stop talking to me, God, and go wash yourself." She turned to her and said, "You look pathetic." Daniel, a colleague who was unable to conceal we don't hire from him because of his smirk. Daniel attends a public school. For the record, I possess a Northwestern MBA. Not that I should have mentioned that I stood motionless. I have always been the type of someone who ponders the ideal return for 3 hours. Later, when I gazed at my bedroom ceiling, all I could sense at the time was embarrassment scuttling up my neck. Rash. Then Martin Chen's door opened. With a manila packet in hand, the CFO entered. With a worried expression upon seeing me standing there, trembling and discolored. "What occurred here?" he inquired, looking between Jessica and me. "Just a bit incident," Jessica stated with ease. "The intern is a little awkward." Martin scowled. A little, but appeared too busy to ask further questions. Well, I have the updated data on shareholders for the Jessica. You'll need to submit a quarterly review. Include this in your presentation. He distributed copies for tomorrow from I observed. His folder as everyone at the table got their packet, my dear. Struck my ribs with such force that I believed it might get bruised, but this wasn't how I had intended for my persona to be disclosed. But perhaps the timing was ideal. I finally, said my voice Martin, more stable than I anticipated. I think I should also have a copy. Jessica letting out a frustrated sigh. This is private financial data. These packets are not given to interns. Martin actually stated, "Look at me more." Carefully, Miss Caldwell. She's correct. Jessica scowled. I should have a copy. Miss Renata Baker Martin is her name. Gave me a packet that belonged to her mother, Baker. Caldwell is her legally recognized last name. Everyone looked down, and the room fell silent, scanning the documents until they discovered I was able to identify the shareholder list. The very moment my name was seen by everyone, heads snapping up to stare, eyes bulging, Jessica flipped wildly at me. I observed her expression as I read through her papers. Color drain as she discovered who she was searching for. 17% of Renata Caldwell ownership, she said in a whisper. Unfeasible, you would rank third. Biggest individual shareholder. I finished cleaning my coffee for her. Cheek with my hands back. Yeah, but you're a trainee, she remarked in a, actually, Jessica, I answered. Small now. Standing more erect in spite of the coffee is still seeping out of my blouse. Became a financial analyst after being employed. And regarding your contract? The space was the air was quiet, and you could hear it. Heating hum. My agreement? Her. My voice cracked a little, and I slowly nodded. Your division is a shareholder. Review in 5 minutes next month, don't you think? I had been the pitiful coffee earlier, soaked no one, and now everyone is looking at the conference. Room gave me a distinct look. Confusion, fear, and reverence were all present. I want to take a moment to say, something that may sound odd, wasn't feeling well. Have you? Have you ever dreamed of anything? About taking place? But when it does, it simply felt empty. That's all. As if I had been invisible for 3 weeks. Being harassed while collecting data regarding Jessica's poisonous culture developed in her field, I discovered stated her team's turnover rate was 78% higher, more than any other department I found. She had expelled 3 extremely competent candidates since they put her in danger. Role that I had witnessed her claim efforts of others so frequently that I'd lost count, and I was now able to. However, power is complex, so I should take a step back. However, my Uncle Leon wasn't your typical. An unidentified investor had been on the 30 years of Black Ridge's original team. Earlier, when there were only 3 men with a company strategy operating. From a garage, he primarily remained behind the scenes, but he had exceptional numerical skills and plan. When he became ill, he began discussing with me the business regarding its people and its principles. The core of any Renier informed me that business is its people. In one of our final discussions, not the customers, not the earnings, the individuals who come each day and decide to donate their vitality to something greater than I had assured him that I would look into, considering his legacy, I joined as a typical worker rather than waltzing. As a significant stockholder, I had to recognize what Black Ridge had turned into. Furthermore, what it had become into. At least in Jessica worked in a department where people were terrified when they saw each other kissing. The quickest method to kick down was to advance where a person like as Jessica could hurl steaming coffee at a coworker and anticipate that everyone will join in the laughter. I was standing there with coffee stains and somehow include every card I believe I mentioned. This meeting should be carefully adjourned. I need to adjust for the time being, and I think everybody has some things to think about. Looked at Martin. Could you arrange for let's have a private conversation about this? In the afternoon, he nodded rapidly. "Any time that works for you, Miss Caldwell." Jessica didn't move from her ideal. Having lost my composure, I could see the computations taking place behind her eyes. How to turn things around and save her stance. How to turn me, become an ally instead. Regarding a danger, Ranatata remarked in a voice artificially heated, "I apologize for the coffee was merely a joke that went along with, 'I'll take you out to lunch today. We ought to get to know one another better.'" The unexpected whiplash of her respect gave me a little queasy feeling. I replied that I had other lunch plans, but I'm going to examine your department's organizational structure this week. I left that so we could meet on Friday. Coffee-soaked meeting room dignity, but with a distinct goal. I wasn't going to be this story's antagonist. I wasn't planning on dismissing Jessica in some dramatic confrontation in the boardroom. That's what people would anticipate. The sweet retaliation of suddenly, the underdog gains power, but I didn't seek retribution. Instead, change was what I desired. But wait, that's a lie. Did desire retribution? God, I so desired it. It tasted metallic to me, and sweet as blood from my cheek bite. I wanted to watch her wriggle, force her to place her high-end purses in a cardboard box, then leave the building under surveillance by security personnel, and I didn't have that aspect of myself. Especially enjoy the part where Uncle Leon would have been let down to see that day. I returned home and sat on the bathroom floor is still smelling like I sobbed while drinking hazelnut coffee. Not because of Jessica, but because I, at last, recognized the significance of what my uncle had left me more than simply stock in a business, yet accountability for people's livelihoods, the ability to change a person's life with just one choice. The following day, I stayed at home and told them I required time to go over the company's materials, which was not wholly false. What I truly needed was room to reflect. What type of individual I aspired to be. Sort of leader. By Wednesday, there were rumors that I received 3 emails from swirling Jessica. Everyone more desperate than the last offered to guide me and demonstrate the leadership ropes to create a fruitful collaboration. Thursday a.m. I looked my best when I entered Blackidge, jacket, and the subdued assurance of someone who was fully aware of her going to do. The murmurs trailed after me down each corridor. People who would never realize my existence all of a sudden. My favorite, my name, and my coffee order lunch location. It felt unreal, and to be honest, Jessica was waiting outside, looking a little disgusting. My small cubicle with a grin that I've been trying to get her eyes to meet mine. In an attempt to contact you, I put together some ideas for departmental enhancements. I nodded courteously, and I'd love to talk. Jessica, we're still scheduled for tomorrow. In the main conference room at 10 a.m., her smile wavered. In fact, I had hoped just the two of us could have a private conversation. I answered, "That won't be necessary." All of the necessary words should. For the record, I've asked HR to come. Her face was devoid of color for the HR. But for the second time that week, this is just a conversation within the department. Nothing needs to be formalized yet. My coffee stains don't agree, I said as I observed her leave with her heels clicking. Quickly, like a terrified heartbeat, I felt the want to crush once more. Her entirely in order to set an example for her to demonstrate to everyone what occurs when you degrade someone merely because you believe, I practiced that night. How I would restructure and what I would say, how would I address her? In her department? Behavior. If I would allow her to keep her job? And by morning, I was certain of what I was going to take place. And as I entered that meeting space where the humiliation had only lasted 4 days, I was aware that everyone was watching me earlier. Now, not with derision, but with an odd sort of respectful fear that made Jessica was already really uncomfortable. Placed a substantial material binder in the flawless expression in front. Of her hair thoughtfully written by Lucia, the HR director Martin took the seat on my right. I put my order just across from Jessica, the same cafe's coffee bot. The catastrophe on Monday was intentional on the let's start at the table between us, I suggested. The room felt different after 4 days. I had been invisible before, but now everyone was observing me as if I might ignite on their own or declare the world dominance. Jessica's gaze was constantly flitting between the coffee cup and my face, like she was figuring out history's odds, repeating itself backwards. God, if I claimed not to have, I would be lying. Considered it just once, for a very short time. Simply reach across, but that person isn't. Even if I occasionally wish it could, I am what I've been doing over the past several days, examining the performance and structure of the Department of Client Acquisitions. I started by talking to HR regarding turnover, rates, complaints, and exit interviews submitted within the previous 18 months. Jessica's smile that was professional and polite didn't. She hesitated, but her knuckles turned white. I've also looked over your own pen. Performance indicators. Jessica, this is the location I want to take a break from the narrative to tell you something significant when you unexpectedly discover that you have authority over someone. You learn from those who have mistreated you. Anything that is unique to you, something that may surprise you. And it's not necessarily anything you enjoy, since in that observing Jessica's attentive, controlled panic that permeated the whole space hold its collective breath, and I found it enjoyable. Liked seeing her wriggle. There was this gloomy, unattractive satisfaction is growing in my chest, and a part of me desired to prolong this merely to observe her. Longer suffering is a component of retaliation. In movies, they don't discuss how it might make you feel both strong and terrible at precisely the same moment that your client, the acquisition figures, are outstanding. Continuing. You have continuously gone above and beyond goals for attracting new clients. Your board presentations have been excellent. You're a great person on paper, performer. A glimmer of hope appeared in her eyes, as if she had endured the storm, but I stated, opening my personal folder, your departmental. In the past, turnover has been disastrous. Just 1 year, 17 workers have departed your team. The same is cited in the exit interviews. Problems repeatedly. I glanced straight at bullying is now taking credit for others' labor, resulting in a hostile workplace environment, endangering people's employment security if they fail to adhere to requirements. Beyond their job description, Jessica's mask momentarily fell off, prior to her becoming well with all the acknowledged Miss Caldwell's outstanding work. I don't push environments for everyone. My group as quality demands pressure. Martin moved uneasily. Jessica has consistently produced outcomes that I discreetly asked the company how much it cost, has invested more than $300,000 in hiring significant expenses for training simply to replace those who couldn't stand to work with her, not including the loss of institutional knowledge or the customers who have had concerns regarding dealing with new faces all the time. I took a thoughtful sip of my coffee, followed by, there is the issue of how you handle those you consider inferior to you, such as hurling steaming coffee at a coworker because it was a joke that you could stated. I've gone too far, Jessica said. Already expressed regret for that. In fact, you have I not responded to your offer to purchase me lunch and guide me after you've realized that I had considerable influence over your career. That isn't an expression of regret. For her own protection, Lucia from HR cleared her throat. We have records of 7 instances throughout the last 12 months that would be considered harassment at work. Everything pertaining to Miss Gordon Jessica's. This was ultimately cracked by great composure. Is ridiculous. I've spent 9 years with Black Edge. I've earned millions in new revenue throughout the years. Company, and you intend to allow some. Here is a 5-minute case of nepotism. Ruin my career because I'm upset. The room fell silent, and I sensed everyone's presence. Observing me in anticipation of my blow-up, if this were to become the business equivalent of a hair pull, I felt exhausted instead of having a cat fight. I'm worn out from the games. Pretending to be weary of Jessica, believing that brutality was a sign of leadership strategy. Your career is not being destroyed by anyone. I stated gently, Jessica, you're being provided an option. I slid a document opposite her at the table. Option 1, you able to take a sideways shift to our research division. Same salary but different duties without direct reports. A 6 months of probation with routine HR check-ins related professional demeanor. Her gaze expanded as she quickly perused the documents. Option 2 is I continued it in the second folder. Information on the severance package that we're ready to provide if you decide to depart. Blackidge, you can't simply demote. Her voice abruptly soared. I've earned my role. One of your responsibilities is to manage, I told people. And you've shown continually stating that you're not willing to or incapable of doing so morally. She looked to Martin. Your desperation was obvious. I can't take this seriously. My client relationships by themselves will be managed by competent team members who already complete the most of the task. I completed for her based on their own remarks. Jessica's face turned red. You're unaware of what it takes to be successful in this field. I've got to be twice as aggressive and twice as tough as any man to reach my current location. And now you wish to discipline me for my lack of civility. Her remarks struck a raw chord with me, due to the fact that I somehow comprehended the financial world as a harsh place for women. You're ineffective and the rope is too soft. Difficult. And you're a person I've spent years treading carefully on the line myself. This isn't about being kind, I muttered. This is about fundamental human decency rather than intimidating your group for failing to throw someone with hot coffee because they used the incorrect milk. She winced. You have until Monday to decide, I replied. Went on. Give it some thought over the weekend. Your options. Jessica suddenly stood up. She gathered her documents with trembling hands. She snapped, My lawyer will get in touch. Walking in the direction of the door, but we all heard her voice tremble after Martin came to face me after leaving with an I was unable to fully read that expression. Was not handled as I had anticipated. How did you expect me to handle? He asked. I questioned, and he shrugged. To be honest, I believe that you would immediately fire her. Most people would have offered the chance. And her treatment of you. I nodded. I thought about it calmly while Lucia glanced. I'm relieved that the strategy of real leadership is demonstrated by firing her. Outright might have led to legal problems. In addition, it may have appeared. Individually driven, it would have been. I acknowledged that I was personally driven. Precisely why I chose not to do it. After the meeting, I returned to my cubicle. The same small area that I had previously occupied. Everyone was aware of my true identity. Pondering for a while if I'd done the proper thing, if I had been harsh, but not sufficiently harsh. Should I have simply moved to a different department myself and stayed away from the entire chaos that I anticipated feeling victorious I'd confronting? The bully I had detained. Responsible, I had exercised my authority. Responsibly, despite the urge to otherwise have been powerful, but instead I simply felt like a complex, messy human. The office was bustling Monday morning. There were rumors that Jessica hadn't seen her. The office door was still closed. People continued to making up reasons to pass my desk, waiting for rumors that I wouldn't share at 9:15. Lucia from Human Resources contacted Jessica's, her choice. She wants to meet with at 10 o'clock. Each of us. My stomach nodded. I oscillated during the weekend, between righteous rage and guilt, between questioning myself and reminding myself of the sensation of standing they were leaking coffee. And the whole crowd chuckled, and Jessica was all ready as we got to the conference room. As usual, her makeup looked perfect, but she was distinctive in some way. A silence that had not existed prior to her looking up as I walked in. I've chose to agree to the transfer to study. I nodded, feeling somewhat comforted. hadn't anticipated, but I believe that's a smart decision, not because I share your she. Added the assessment fast, but because I have made too many investments in this business. Lucia shoved the documents as she left. We'll have to move across the table, going over the terms one more to ensure Jessica signed her, so everything is obvious. Name on each line, I felt uneasy. Contentment? No happiness? Just silence assurance that this wasn't required, not only for me, but for everyone who would ever made to feel inferior by her presence. After we were done, Jessica looked for the first time since, right at me. You know, she added as she entered the room. Her finely modulated voice said, I believed you were feeble on the first day. When you were simply standing there drinking coffee, not battling but dripping down your face, I said back, I thought you were pathetic. I wonder if you'll still be waiting, be the kind, cheerful Ranada in a year. Power changes now, she added. People are generally not better. Perhaps I did acknowledge, but treating people. Being treated with fundamental respect isn't about pleasant. It's about being human, she concluded. Her belongings and stood. I wish you luck in that. Philosophy, you will be consumed by this industry. She exhaled after leaving Lucia alive. Well, that may have gone worse. The day is still young, so I grinned faintly. The weeks that followed were an odd period of adjustment. The client, the acquisitions team, underwent a restructuring. Transferred to a formal office. My role enlarged to incorporate advice on significant financial choices that were appropriate. For my status of shareholders, people stopped calling me as an intern and began phoning me. Instead, I missed being Miss Caldwell. Sometimes I missed the clarity because I was invisible, of existing undervalued Jessica, and I stayed away from each other effectively for about a month. When we did cross paths in the corridors, she'd nod rigidly, I'd nod in return, and we'd proceed in the opposite directions. Office politics at the most fundamental level, then came the presentation of Anderson's account. It was Jessica had a significant prospective client. Been growing for several months prior to her, I was requested to join the transfer pitch meeting due to my finances knowledge. We ended ourselves in the same conference room in which she had flung coffee at me when we first met. Since that day, back there together, there was enough tension to choke on. Jessica gave a presentation on her findings. I managed the finances flawlessly. Projections. We operated as strangers at the workplace, neither recognizing our past. The customer looked, impressed by the considerate question. Questions that we carefully addressed tandem. After everyone dispersed, I waited to get my notes, so I did Jessica. There was a long pause between us. Nice work in there, he said, like a tight rope. I stated it at last, since someone had to. She gave me a glance and said something. You didn't have to provide me with credit for the first interaction with the client. You have the option to seize that for yourself. Shrugged. I don't take it. It was your work. Not like me taking credit for stuff I didn't do. There was an edge to the issue, but also something akin to sincere interest didn't say that. She smoothed her sigh. Already flawless hair. The study division isn't as bad as I thought it would be. Because it's quieter, I can concentrate on my work. Rather than overseeing personalities, I wasn't sure. But that's excellent. Where this discussion was going, Jessica collected her files. I will not apologize on purpose, once more, or act as though we are suddenly buddies, but I respect that I could have been ruined by you and you didn't. That wasn't my intention. Did she not give me a stern look? I even briefly thought about lying. Then changed my mind for a while. Yes, actually, quite a few times, but retaliation. Actions and imaginations are not the same. A shadow of a smile appeared on her lips. In any case, I appreciate you not tossing coffee. Today, I wouldn't have displayed the same restriction, and she proceeded to walk. I sat there for a while after she left. flipping our discussion in my keep in mind. That it wasn't forgiveness from on both sides. It wasn't actually conclusion. It was only an honest moment. Recognition between two complex ladies with complex emotions in the months after Blackage, things changed. Not drastically, not right away, but slowly, I made use of my position to bolster anti-bullying measures, policies, exit interviews. Turned into required channels for anonymous feedback were made so that workers may report worries without worrying about reprisals. Jessica continued her studies, while she was excellent at all the accounts we kept. However, our professional distance. Sometimes I caught her observing me. In meetings using the phrase, I was unable to fully understand curiosity, something completely different from resentment when I'm now asked about the coffee incident, and it did become legendary. Sufficient in business knowledge to merit that title, I often just change and smile. The topic, it isn't because I am ashamed or because I'm sorry for the way I handled matters, because the narrative isn't actually about contracts or coffee. Considering the role of corporate power, it's about what? When we suddenly gain control over, it's about the person who has harmed us. Thin line between retribution from justice. It's about understanding that even individuals, whoever has been harsh, is more intricate than they initially seem. Occasionally, during business functions, Jessica and I continue to find myself in the same circle of discourse. There's always that epiphany that was conveyed, recollection of coffee splashing abrupt. Change in power humiliation will both make quick eye contact. Recognizing the moment without having said that, we'll go back to talking about the quarterly forecasts or market trends. Two working ladies who formerly held opposing positions on a power dynamism currently present in the complex compromise of regard for one another without friendship, for which I never bought coffee anybody else at Blackage Little Triumphs. That's my story, then. It's not a fairy tale. Story retaliation in which the antagonist receives utterly demolished and everyone cheers. It's not a flawless conclusion where former rivals end up becoming greatest buddies. A complex human circumstance in which I attempted to act morally even when a part of me desired to complete the fulfilling task. Rather, if you have ever been in a place where you were treated like you were nothing till you found out later, they had no idea you were in a position of authority. I hope my story is helpful in some way. Ideal method to deal with it without a manual for handling that strange emotions landscape. You simply need to choose what the type of individual you wish to be when as the tables turn. I hope that the choice is you can coexist with it for a long time after the retaliation satisfaction has diminished. If you enjoyed this story, please click subscribe and inform me in the comments section if have you ever encountered a circumstance where you have to decide between seeking retribution and something more intricate, and if Jessica just so happens to be viewing this. The coffee shop on 9th Street continues to make that just saying, hazelnut lattes.